All right, everyone, the red light is on and we are recording. This is Mark back for another episode of the Veteran Semi-Professional. So today's interview episode where I'm interviewing a veteran about their life and career after the military, all in effort to help you, maybe if you're still in, excuse me, hitting my stand here. If you're still in and you're trying to figure out what the hell am I going to do once I can put my hands back in my pockets, grow out my hair, and start wearing these things called civilian clothes, this is the show for you. Okay. So my job is to bring some really cool people on who've had ups and downs, failures and successes after the military to show you, what options are out there and how you might get started going down a certain career path. Okay, so I'm super pumped for today's guest. We're gonna be able to talk some entrepreneurial things. We're gonna be talking like some veteran recruiting and like what that space looks like. Lots of good experience with Rob here today. So, Rob, if you can take a minute, introduce yourself. I'd love to just expose you to the crowd here.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mark, thank you so much for having me on the podcast today. So my name is Rob Arndt. I am the founder and CEO of BufferSprings. We are a training consulting firm that helps smart organizations build effective military recruitment, engagement, and retention programs. Background on me, I am a 14-year Marine Corps veteran, 12 years on active, about 2 years in the reserves. Went in 2000, came out of Erie, Pennsylvania, came in and enlisted right out of high school. Transitioned out after 12 years as an E7 gunnery sergeant, leaving recruiting duty as my last field and last place. The Marine Corps kind of dumped me off on here and kind of took what I learned on Marine recruiting, applied it to the civilian sense, and have spent the past decade really working with some awesome organizations and really doing what I'm passionate about, connecting veterans to opportunities and opportunities to veterans. So it's great to wake up every day doing something that you love.
Love it, man. Love it. So, I think you said you ended up in the recruiting in Marine Corps. What did you enter in as?
Yeah, so I was a kind of a knucklehead kid. I got in some trouble and everything else, so I didn't get the opportunity to pick my job. So I came in open contract, basic needs of the Marine Corps at the time. So enlisted, ended up with supply and logistics. Wasn't really sure what that was. Spent about 4 years doing that. Deployed to Iraq with my unit doing supply and logistics. Did kind of a BMOS over there because it was needed, and got a secondary MOS in nuclear, biological, chemical. Then when I came back from the desert, got flagged for recruiting duty. Did not want to do that whatsoever. Wanted to go back out with my unit. We had other, missions, things we were going in, and was finally getting into the, kind of the flow of things. And then completely disrupted my life. Went into recruiting, but ironically found my calling and my niche of being in sales and taking that first kid that I was hunting down and everything else to, all right, Sarge, you're good. And I was kind of pissed off that he called me Sarge. That's more of an Army thing than a Marine thing. But I was like, all right, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life is, close and help people, understand what opportunities are there for them. So found my calling there, transitioned out of the Marine Corps officially, went off to a government contractor and quickly became part of that statistic. The 67% of us that leave that first post-military job wasn't a good cultural fit for me. I went from being a Marine gunny and running recruiting stations and doing whatever I wanted to being packed into a cubicle, then getting my first HR complaint when I told a vendor they need to ship me an order when they didn't perform on it. So quickly realized it wasn't a good cultural fit for me. So, and I did not prepare or was not prepared enough from the transition programs that existed at the time in 2012. I've heard they've got a little bit better now, but the stats are still pretty staggering in the opposite direction. But really tried to find a way to make other veterans and not take that Claymore mind face on that I took on and take care of our own and empower our community. So kind of started putting all these ideas down on paper of things that I wanted to do in the industry and creating my own crosswalks and pathways for veterans, but quickly realized I was reinventing the wheel that already existed. So over the past 10 years, I've worked with some great organizations. I've been a senior executive at Bradley Morris and Recruit Military, MBA Veterans, Shift, and then some other platforms before deciding to hang up my own shingle and take this on my own with BufferSprings earlier this year. So
One, I'm just trying to imagine the conversation with you and someone from HR, like they're talking to you, and you're the Marine. You're like, yeah, man, just like ship me out of order. Like I got stuff to do today, and the HR manager's, hey, Rob, so this vendor called. They're a little upset. We just want to talk to you about what happened and like get your feelings about it. And you're like, yeah, I just told him to shit out an order. Like I got stuff to do, man. He's like, he's weighing me down. I got to move. Anyway, I'm just having this like funny image relay in my head. I'm not sure exactly how it went down, but I imagine it probably wasn't too far off from
That's about the extent of it. And it was really culture shock because like I was really raw as a Marine gunny. Like
Yeah.
I grew
Yeah.
up, I
Yeah.
was a
Yeah.
street kid to begin with. So I didn't have any of those filters or
Right.
etiquette or any of that stuff at that point. And I was a little bit better by the time of transition from the military, but that's just the culture that we were in as
Right.
Marines
Right.
and wartime recruiting. You don't have time. Mission is first. You have we had almost impossible missions trying to stack people up, and we had a war going on
Yeah.
and I'm recruiting in the Boston area. It's not the most military friendly or area of the country either. So we just had to move at that pace and get stuff done, and didn't have time for the niceties that were there, and
Yeah.
that didn't echo well in corporate America right out of the gate. I wish it did,
Right.
but it didn't.
It can be hard to move from that, that environment where you're using fuck as a comma to not.
Yeah.
Like, you can't even use it.
Adjective, adverb. Now, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah. It literally every
yeah.
single bit of grammatical structure fuck can be used for, if you ask the right grunt. And it's hard to then reposition yourself where like, well, I can't even use it once in a sentence, let alone like every other word. It's tough. Yeah.
Right. And that eliminated 30% of my vocabulary, is not being able to drop that F bomb in the office. I didn't know how to talk to people again.
Right. Okay. So after that first job, what was the decision then? Like, okay, clearly I'm not liking this. What was like the move forward? Okay, this is the direction I want to go.
So I started putting all these ideas down on paper. As a matter of fact, this little red book that I have in my hand, I just picked up this and just started putting all these notes and ideas. And whenever I was like looking at things, and I've kept that notebook with me and just kept it going for the last like 10 years. Whenever I see ideas, or I'm at an event, or I talk to a veteran, or there's some sort of like sticking moment, everything goes in there as kind of like a ledger for me. And then I put all my thoughts together and put things into action. And that's really what I'm doing at BufferSprings now, is putting 10 years in the making in the civilian industry, and then my 12 years active on military service, really putting that experience together to make a more well-rounded experience for both veterans as well as the clients that we're serving, and really being dual-sided in our focus of taking care of both sides of that coin simultaneously, but with the same matter of intent and passion. However, we're never going to charge veterans a dime for anything that we do here. So we do charge for our consulting and training services. So we have our B2B play where we generate revenue. Then we have our B2C play, or business to consumer play, where we're working with individual veterans, but we're never going to charge them anything. And that's more of a, something of us just empowering and helping our community get on a better footing out here in the civilian world.
I'm super curious on your notebook. Have you ever tried using any type of like digital tool or, online thing to keep track of notes and to-do lists and all that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, especially as a bootstrapping entrepreneur, Google Docs is everything. It's free, it's
Right.
accessible. I have it on every device and everything. So some of this I'll translate over to that, or I'll distill all these thoughts, put everything on one page, compartmentalize those, break those down to training endeavors and things like that to either share with clients or veterans together. So taking those notes, scribbled down in action, and actually condensing them into things that we can utilize.
Yeah, I'm just curious. So it was like, for years I've been trying to do to-do lists on, I tried Google Calendar, I tried this, I tried that, this app, and nothing has worked for me like pen and paper, of just at the start of the day, like, okay, like these are the big ticket items I got to do, and like handwriting it down. And for me personally, game changer. And like whenever I go to like a networking event or conference or something, I always have like a written notebook with me where I take down notes about like, this is who I talk to, this is the point, whatever. For me personally, that's just always worked super well. Then I also have like a gazillion different Google Docs open with all kinds of information in there for sure. I was just kind of
Yeah.
curious, like what your personal habits were.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the big things. I have to write things down on paper. I skipped typing class when I was in high school, and I never actually got into it. So I type with 3 fingers on each hand. It's like a velociraptor type of style of typing. So I don't type all that fast. I've used note-taking things, or like Scratchpad in conjunction with Salesforce. But even when I'm on calls with clients and whatnot, I'm writing all this chicken scratch down, drawing little pictures and nanograms and things like that on the paper, and then exchanging them over in digitizing those thoughts. So what's helped me immensely with compartmentalizing a lot of that stuff, though, is I've looked at the entrepreneur operating systems and all these different systems that are there, but they almost became more of a task and a project in themselves, is trying to stick to this script and have your level 10 meetings and rocks and pebbles and all that stuff. And for some people it's useful, but for me, it's just the classic old Eisenhower matrix of drawing a X in a piece of paper, and my urgent important stuff's in the upper
Yeah.
left. The other stuff's in the upper right. And then the stuff that I can get to later or delegates down in the bottom. And it's just a matter of prioritizing the million things that I have to do as an entrepreneur, as a father, as a husband, and all the other moving parts that I have in life. So that's been immensely helpful, just putting it on paper and distilling that and seeing what's important, what's not.
Yeah. And I don't want to like have us all go down this, journaling rabbit hole or something. That's not how this show is formatted.
Yeah.
Something I've recently started doing myself. So I have like, a couple of phrases that I write down at the start of every day, just like my little, personal mantra. And then I split my day into revenue, non-revenue.
Yeah.
Right. And I literally just like, okay, revenue, like that's the first thing I got to worry about because like that's what's going to keep the business afloat. That's what's going to pay the bills. Like that's like the oil that keeps the machine running. Okay. Non-revenue. Sometimes those are like personal tasks or like the stuff that I can't necessarily directly equate this to, sale or whatever it may be. And then kind of go back to like the Eisenhower matrix. It's like within each one of those lists, there's like, okay, this is a top priority, act on, urgent. Other one, okay, I can wait a bit longer on there. That's like me personally. I just started doing this about like 2 months ago. Been super helpful for me.
Yeah, and I do something similar. And the other thing that I do is like if something doesn't exist on my Google Calendar, like it's never
Oh
going to
yeah,
happen. So
yeah,
I'll block out time like Monday, hey, 2 hours, you're updating your CRM and redoing, analyzing what you have for revenue streams and everything else coming in. Tuesday, block out 2 hours for marketing and materials and whatnot, and trying to really dedicate time and keep myself focused on that. And personal stuff too, like actually putting stuff on my calendar to go to the gym and take care of
yeah.
myself and my family and really have a real good balance across all aspects of my life.
I got so addicted to my calendar a couple months ago. I actually sent my best friend. He said he wanted to chat about something, and I sent him my Calendly link, and he's like, "The fuck did you just send me your Calendly link
Yeah.
for, man? Like that's not how this works,
I do
dude."
that shit all the time. I do that shit all the time, but it's like
He's
if
like,
it's not
"No,
on there, it
no, no,
doesn't
no, no.
exist.
I've known you for 10 years. I'm not booking time with you on your calendar. We're just gonna fucking talk
Yeah.
together."
Right.
Uh, but yeah, it's the good place to like keep yourself organized and everything. Okay,
Yeah,
we
for sure.
digress here a little bit. Um, so you spent a while working in like really kind of like the military veteran recruiting industry. Okay, what was your first job? What was the first company you worked for there?
So I worked for a federal contractor for a little while before going off to recruit military in Bradley Morris. So what happened is, it was just recruit military at the time. I started researching other companies that were doing things like I wasn't reinventing the wheel on my couch like I thought I was. Recruit military kept popping up. So I had reached out, did some research, found the original CEO and founder, Drew Myers. He was a former Marine. I was a former Marine. They were based out of Cincinnati. I was in Boston. So I just reached out to the CEO on LinkedIn, just cut through all the bullshit and everything else, went directly to the decision maker and said, this is who I am. This is what I do. Would love to become a part of your company if you're hiring in the Boston area. If not, I'll basically see you in the ring in 6 months and I'll be a competitor. And, Drew ended up reaching out to me. We had a great call, ended up connecting with the head of sales at the time, who's now the COO of Bradley Morris from Recruit Military, Larry Slagle, who's a good friend of mine. And we just ended up clicking. So I started off as an account executive, coming from Marine recruiting duty. Like mission failure was never an option. And I just love sales, true student of the game and everything. So just went there, made a good impression, started crushing it out of the gate. And quickly, after about 8 years and a few promotions, I left there as the senior vice president of business development and senior vice president of sales, heading up the sales team and a lot of the talk tracks and building playbooks and some of the products there. But just went off to get some other experience in the industry and didn't want to stay in one company. I still have friends. They're still a great partner of mine out there in the space, but wanted to go off, learn different things, get new experiences, and really hone my craft and learn different ways and different aspects of attacking this business.
So one, I first want to highlight that what you did to get the role of just go straight to the top, like go straight to the CEO. And I think especially for vets, we can be like reticent to do that. The chain of command has been ingrained in us
Yes.
of like I need to follow the procedures. I need to, go online and hit the application button and kind of do what everyone else does. And I can't just jump the chain like that. Like bullshit. Like you can work for this guy. Like he's just another person out there on the street, right?
Right.
There's absolutely nothing stopping you from just reaching out to that person. I remember actually my last like 2 years in the army or something. Actually, sorry, it was before that. Uh, they went through this big, some type of like reevaluation of people's profiles and everything. And so we had a couple officers, captains in my battalion who had some minor infraction from earlier in their career and they were getting kicked out. Okay. So, with this one captain, it was great officer, a little bit of an asshole, but like was a great officer. Okay. And he was like, screw that, man. Like, I'm better than this. So he emailed the chief of staff of the army directly and was like, hey man, like I want to stay in and like, I'm good. Here's my record. I know I screwed up, did this dumb thing when I was a brand new lieutenant, but like, I'm still good. And then guess what? Everyone else got kicked out except for him. They changed his mind. And because he just went straight to the top and said, I got nothing to lose. Worst case scenario, I don't get the job. I don't get, I'm going to get kicked out of the army anyway, whatever. And your scenario, like you didn't have the job anyway. So like, might as well just go to the top and give it a shot.
And I got there in a roundabout way because what happened to me is what happens to a lot of vets. When I got out, I was like, you know what? I can take my pick of employers. There's so many veteran friendly employers waving flags and talking about they want to hire me out there and that I'm their hero and everything else. So I can apply anywhere and get whatever job I want. So I applied to my, top 5 jobs and companies that I wanted to work at. Went to their website, applied online, crickets, nothing. These were jobs that I was qualified and sometimes overly qualified for. Then I went top 10, nothing. Top 25. Then I got to the point of desperation because I hated the place that I was in. It was not good for me. It was a toxic environment for me at that time. It just wasn't conducive to what I wanted to do. So I started applying everywhere, and I probably submitted 200 different applications on job boards and everything else and never heard anything back. So at one point I just said, you know what, fuck it. I'm just going to reach out and use my network as a Marine and as a service member, see if there's any veterans in these companies that I can reach out to and say, hey, what do you do? And like you said, there's nothing to lose in that, but I had everything to lose because with the job market and the job boards and things like that, just them not working out, like time is the only thing that we can't make more of. And that's what I was losing was time of my life in a job that was going nowhere, and time of my life just applying to things and tweaking my resume to each individual role that I wouldn't even get a rejection notice or even know whether it was accepted or not. And just had to take it upon my own hands and say, all right, I'm a good salesperson, but I can't sell somebody digitally or let my resume, which my resume still sucks. That's part of the reason why I started a company, is because I don't want to rewrite a fucking resume and talk about what I did in the past. I want to go forward and do things. But, that was really the eye opener for me, is like, hey, I'm a salesperson. I'm not using my best experiences and attributes. I need to do that and start talking with some human beings and trying to sell them on who I am and to give me a shot. And luckily they did.
So just before the show, you and I were riffing a little bit about some of the mistakes that the veterans are prone to make in the job
Yes.
hunt process, right? So I know you've worked with, probably dozens, if not hundreds of maybe even thousands of people at this point. Can you talk about some of those common mistakes that you see that, you, as you were working with candidates, you might have seen them make as they're like either fresh out or maybe 2 years out going through the process of trying to land that job?
Yeah. A lot of it is lack of planning. And I was part of that as well. I took it, and I was on Marine recruiting duty in a wartime, a recruiting environment. Like I took it up to the last day, was still holding a mission letter, still working with my people. I was still answering the phone the week after I EAS because I had, some of my guys in my shop asking me questions and stuff like that. And I couldn't turn my back on the institution. So I didn't really start planning to transition out. I thought it was going to be a lot easier than it was. And even the things that I was told in TAP class and whatnot, like, hey, you're a hero, America owes you a debt of gratitude. They'd be lucky to have you. You can apply anywhere. But
Oh my God, my blood is boiling right now when I hear that.
exactly.
Yeah.
But it's not true. And what I found is that like the people who were giving that guidance were all, retired E9s that stayed on
Right.
base. They still had a flat top. They were wearing core frames, given the class in civilian attire where, rocking core frames. It's like, I'm getting advice on how to be a civilian from a dude who has not been a civilian for at least 30 years.
Like you might have transitioned out of the military. Like you no longer have, the active duty CAC anymore, but like you're still in the military. Like this is like basically the exact same thing. Like mentally, there's no significant difference here.
Yeah, when your hobbies are to go to the PX on weekends and bitch at Marines for wearing flip flops and not shaving, like that,
right?
You're still institutionalized. You're not a civilian.
Yeah. So we could probably talk all day about how like the system is not deliberately designed, but like byproduct of the design is that like a lot of us come out just not ready for it.
Yeah.
Like if you were talking to someone who's maybe plus or minus 12 months out of, hey, listen, I've seen a lot of people come ahead of you who did XYZ, and like that's just really fucking stupid. Don't do this. What were like some of those maybe those key points? I know, like earlier I was sharing a story with a guy who, he got a great offer from a company, and then came back with a counter offer, and some of the stuff he he asked for was just ridiculous. And I was like, listen, man, like this is just not how these jobs work. All right. He wanted just like some very specific things. I'm like, this is not how employment works. And sorry, but you're a good candidate for this thing, but there's 20 other people lined up behind you that are also, pretty good candidates here. This is, you're not the Pope or something. You're not that unique that you can't be replaced. So I want to point out some of those points that maybe people might not know about.
Yeah, I mean, some of the guidance that I'll give, especially talking with transitioning vets, I have 6 skill bridgers right now that are interning with us as well. And we have our own kind of tap on steroids curriculum. The first thing that I recommend doing is really decompressing, taking a step back, shedding that uniform. You are no longer in the Army. Even for the Marine Corps, for me, the Marine Corps was a big part of my life, but that was a girlfriend who I loved very much who doesn't remember my fucking name. And you need to let go of that. Like the institution's not going to have your back anymore. As much as you
Oh my
may
God,
have
I
a
love
Marine
that.
tattoo or wear shirts, like she doesn't give a fuck about you anymore. And you have to swallow that pill. And that's tough for a lot of vets to compartmentalize. So that's the first part of it, is shedding that skin and then sitting down and actually realizing what you want to do and who you want to be. Because as nerve wracking as it is, this is a exciting time to choose your own adventure of what you do next. So you can pick what your ideal work environment is, whether it's outside or it's inside, it's around people, it's remote, and you can really narrow that stuff down to see what you want to do, reinvent yourself, and what an ideal life looks like for you, and really put everything into perspective. Because the Army, the Marine Corps, whoever you were with has told you what to wear, who you're hanging out with, what your mission is for years. Now you get to decide what you wear, what you do, what you don't do, who you spend time with. And, you need to reflect on what's important. You've had to sacrifice your family and livelihood and things that you do and don't want to do throughout the years. You don't have to do that anymore. So put a put on a piece of paper what's important to you and revolve your life around those people and those things. And for me, it was family. Of I got out, Gunny took a back seat because dad trumped that. That was more important to me. So luckily I put all that into perspective out of the gate, and I, made my life revolve around the things that were important to me. So I highly recommend service members to do that, and then tap into other vets. Like, we're, as veterans, like, we may bust each other's balls, Marines will bust Army's balls and we're better than you and all that other stuff. But at the end of the day, we're all green. We all look out for each other, and we take each other, we help each other, and we have a community. And that's important to understand, that you're not alone out here. While we were in service, missions and all that stuff, nothing happens without the pack. It's the strength of the pack is the wolf. The strength of the wolf is the pack. But when we get out, we're like lone wolves. We don't connect with any other veterans. We, don't utilize that network that we come from. And it took me a while to even click with that. My old CEO was a Harvard Business School grad, and really, brilliant guy. But I was pitching to the CEO of Deutsche Bank in a high rise in Boston, and I was like, my CEO is in town. I'm like, hey, you should come with me to this. Like, this may be, something a little bit over my head, and I'd be more comfortable having CEO to CEO. So he showed up. And when we walk in the room, the CEO of Deutsche Bank and my CEO both knew each other in Harvard Business School, and they had like nicknames like Pigpen, Fuckface. It's like, hey, what's up? And I'm like, wow, they have such a cool camaraderie from Harvard Business School. I wish I could go there and have that. And then I took a step back. I'm like, I can connect with any other Marine or service member on the planet. Like, we have
Right.
such a stronger bond. We don't use it. So look at your ideal company, look at your ideal work atmosphere, the job, the culture, what you want to do, and then find that position or that company out there, and then find other veterans that are there and reach out and just knock on their door. We're not going to tell each other to fuck off as vets. It's, hey, Mark, I'm a vet, you're a vet, you work at this company. Any pointers, or who should I be talking to? Because the reality is, when you're trying to navigate the digital job world, that's only 20% of the jobs that are advertised. Even with Recruit Military, when I went there, they didn't have my job. They created a job for me because they saw something in me, because I reached out. So reach out to vets, try to carve out your own way to get into that organization. And it's all about who you know and flexing that network and utilizing it and leveraging it. So work with other vets and find out what you want to do, then go for that. The other thing I'll say is that ammo is expensive. The time that I wasted rewriting my resume, applying, and all that other stuff, that's time lost that I'll never
Yeah.
get back. So make sure that you're focused on the right target, not just spraying and praying and hoping that you hit black. Like, figure out what black is and zero in on that and make it happen.
Yeah. One thing I really want to highlight that I don't think I've talked about enough about on the show, but is the idea of an informational interview. Okay. And a great way to do that, if you list out, you may think, okay, I want to work at this company, this company, this company, and this company. Okay. And if you're just coming out of the military, or maybe you're a couple months out or whatever, most likely, I'm guessing those are ones you've just heard a bunch in the news, or, they're big name brands that you know of or something. Okay. Here's a technique. So, like, you go down there, you go on LinkedIn, you find another veteran at that company, you call them and you say, hey, listen, I just want to know what it's like to work there.
Yes.
Talk to me about the culture. Talk to me about what your day to day is like. Okay. Talk to me about what you like and you don't like about the company. One of the great things I've always found about talking to veterans about the culture of an organization is, like, we usually cut through the bullshit and tell people, listen, like, this is what it's really like to work here. Here's like there's some really good benefits. Here's XYZ. But then also, like, here's the real downside. And I have not gotten the downside as much when I've talked to civilians about something. Like, it seems to be a little more rose colored glasses, but it's just like embedded into us to complain and recognize the reality of something. And so I think that's just like part of military culture, that we're just like, we just spit it out. Okay.
Yeah.
So do that a couple times, and you may quickly find out, it turns out that I don't want to work at Exxon. Turns out that I don't want to work at Amazon. That wasn't actually what I wanted to do. And then you start crossing things off your list. That way, when you start going to the application route, or the actual, like, committing to trying to get a job route, now you're spending your ammo in a more efficient manner than you would have if you were just spraying and praying.
I 100% agree with that statement. And that's so it's so important to find out the good, bad, and ugly of that, because even the cultures that we come from in the military, and I was on Marine recruiting duty for 7.5 years. We didn't paint rose gardens. We didn't say how, we were doing puppet shows on Friday and it's like daycare and it's so fun and everything else. It's like, look, there's a war going on, and our job as Marines is to fight battles and win wars. And that's it. You may be deployed to a foreign land where people don't like you and might want to shoot at you. Are you good with that? Are you still wanting to do this? And we've been, to your point, it's all about embracing the suck, and you get through the shitty parts because you're around great people, but everybody knows the good, bad, and ugly of that. And we're in it together at the end of the day, and that camaraderie is there. So to that point, talk to veterans that work there, talk to other people that work there. But that's something that we do when we're training companies as well. When we're talking to HR and talent acquisition and recruiters, like, don't bullshit vets. We have good bullshit radars. Tell us that it's going to be a non-climate controlled warehouse in the middle of central Texas in the middle of summer and it's 100 fucking degrees. Don't let us find that out on the first day on the job and it wasn't what we were anticipating. We go out the back door. Tell us up front. It's like, oh yeah, I've eaten that shit sandwich before. It was a 127 in Iraq when I left. That's nothing. That's a spring day for me. Just tell us the good, bad, and ugly about it, or else, it's just going to turn into attrition later on in life. And for vets specifically, like, we have thick skin. Like, there's not much that we haven't seen or done that civilian world can throw at us.
Right. And sorry for everyone who's watching right now. My fiance was popping in and letting the dogs into the room real quick, I think, just to screw with me. But to go back to, I would have loved to have seen a Marine Corps puppet show at some point. I think that would have been awesome if we can somehow make that work. I do want to ask. So you mentioned at the start, I think this is the kind of company you were referring to just now in your story in New York of working for Shift, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm going to ask a very blunt question. I still don't totally know what Shift does.
And I think they're still figuring it out. I mean, after I left there, it wasn't, I really haven't kept good communications or anything with them. I mean, I was in the same boat where I'm not quite sure what they're doing or what they're working on now. I mean, there's, I don't know if I'm still bound under NDAs and all that other stuff. So I'm going to be cryptic in it, but with their vision, I mean, there's some great people that are there, but their vision just didn't align with my vision at the end of the day. And, after 9 months of being there, I had to move on and go on to something different.
And hey, I'll tell everyone listening, if you have some good insights, or, if you've worked with Shift in any type of capacity, I would love to know and learn more. I've kind of had a little bit of a blank time trying to connect with anybody there, really. But if someone can illuminate that for me at all, I would greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, you and I could talk offline as well. Not put it out there in podcast.
Yeah. No worries. All right. Well, I definitely want to get the last 15 minutes or so to talk about BufferSprings. So one, I'm a sucker for a good origin story, and like, how did this idea originate, and then, like, how did you start actioning on it?
it's right when I got that HR complaint, when I told that vendor to ship me an order, I started thinking like, wow, I was not prepared for this. The system did not set me up for success. I'm a problem
Mhm.
solver. Like that's my go-to. It's like one of my superpowers is being able to break things down, rebuild them to be better. And I saw a problem with the way veterans transition. I saw the way that I had a turbulent transition. Also saw the how companies, like, they were a federal contractor, they were hiring vets just because they had to. They didn't understand what veterans brought to the table or the merits. They were just like, okay, that checks a box, that keeps the government out of our ass for another month while we continue to make money off of it. So so that's where it came from, the book, and the little red book and everything that I've been doing. But if I would have started this company 10 years ago when I wanted to originally, I would have failed miserably. I didn't know what I know now. I don't have the network and friends and colleagues and experiences. Like, even you and I were talking about that candidate that wanted all these outlandish things. You're like, man, I got kicked in the balls. It's like, that's happened to me 500 fucking times at this point. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
I've got the bruises to prove it and everything else at this point. And to me, that experience has been what's proved and validated that I'm ready to hit the ground on with BufferSprings. But kind of the origin story of it was, it came from that. It came from what I've been doing over the years and just different ways of doing things. But I saw my vision just never really completely aligned anywhere else. And rather than trying to change companies from within and speaking up and saying things in meetings and trying to shift the company that may have different visions than me, like, it just made more sense to go out there and say, you know what, I owe it to myself, and I could fuck this up myself. Let me just give it a shot. And came out of the gate swinging January 1st, and it's been working well. We validated the business. We're working with some phenomenal clients. And the best part about it, like, when I sat down, I had some soul searching from my last employer. It did not end well. I'll just say that. Moving out of the veteran space and just selling a HR tech product and machine learning and AI and all this new buzz that's coming out, and seeing that the emperor actually had no clothes behind the scenes on some of these things, it really gravitated me back to the veteran niche. And I understood it more and had a more universal approach to just talent acquisition and HR technology as a whole. So, like, I'm seeing things through a lot of different viewpoints. I've worked with thousands of veterans at this point. No shit, thousands of them, hundreds of companies at this point. I know what works, what doesn't work, what's backfired in the process, and really have that knowledge basis where we can quickly and succinctly unfuck somebody's veteran program and get a great career path for military vets. And that's kind of just the origin of it. And Buffer Springs in itself, that was one of the hardest parts of establishing the business, is figuring out, what the fuck am I going to name this thing? What am I naming this puppy or this baby at
Yeah,
the end of the day? And
yeah,
that
yeah.
took years. And I had all these failed ideas in my red book of what I wanted it to be. But one day it just, like, came to me. And I was like, I wanted something that sounded prestigious as, like, a consulting firm or like a nice place. And, like, Buffer Springs sounds like a nice place to take your kids on vacation. Like, oh, we're going to Buffer Springs this year. So it had that prestige to it. But us as service members, we know what a buffer spring is. It's a component in a rifle. It absorbs recoil and impact from that round, and actually uses that force rather than negative, bruising your shoulder up and fucking you up. It takes that negative force, pushes it forward, and uses that energy to put that round back on black and cycle another round in the chamber and keep hitting targets. And that's what we want to do for organizations and for veterans, is absorb that impact, make it as easy and palatable as possible, and get you so you're hitting black and not have to deal with dumb shit. So that's kind of the origin story of what we've created
Dude,
here.
that is a beautiful way to name a company. Oh my god, I love that. Yeah, I'll be honest. Like, I was kind of sitting here wondering. I was like, where exactly is Buffer Springs, man? And then, like, dude, that just nailed it.
Yeah.
Perfect. I'm super curious. So, anything in the, like, the veteran hiring, transition, consulting space, I think at some point, especially to, like, an outsider, someone who's not familiar with the veteran transition process, or companies hiring veterans or something, they look at a company like yours and they say, okay, this all sounds good, Rob. This is wonderful and stuff, but, like, why does a company, like, why does your client need you? Like, what critical, gap in the market do you fill?
So part of the problem that I see in what we try to solve here for organizations and veterans is that we are looking at it through a dual sided approach. We care about the vets, and even some of the other organizations will post, like, their sales numbers. Hey, we hit, this rep hit $1 million in sales, but how many veterans did that actually impact? How many people got jobs? How many lives were changed? How many families are better off because of these services? And what I started noticing is that a lot of the industry is transactional in its approach. It's go to a job fair, it's post a job on a site, it's pay me a 30% fee to put one ass in one seat for your company. And it's very transactional in nature, but the
Yeah.
after effect, like once that transaction's done or that person showed up to a job fair or clicked on a job, like what happens from there? So the other issue is that there are over 47,000 nonprofits, veteran service organizations, veteran support organizations, and they all fucking look the same. They're red,
Oh my
white, and
God,
blue.
man.
There's an eagle in
Yeah.
their logo somewhere. They all look the same. And what happens with that, and I appreciate how much emphasis and how much attention there are on veteran issues, but what it does is it convolutes the market where you have this sea of goodwill of all these people, but veterans don't know how to navigate through it. So they drown in the sea of goodwill. Companies are well intentioned, but they drown in the sea of goodwill. The difference for us is that we know both sides of those personas. We're in the middle of the sea. We understand who are the good partners, who they should be working with. And each individual veteran, each individual company is different. They cannot use the same services. Veterans that may be right for you to hire are not right for your competitor or the company down the road to hire. Each veteran is an individual. Each company has different missions. So it's about being very objective and strategic in finding the right people, matching the right people up on there and navigating those waters and finding out what works, what doesn't work, cutting through the bullshit and narrowing down like what you want to do and who you want to do it with. So with us, where we cut down, we don't offer the transactional services. We partner with a lot of organizations. We partner with Recruit Military, Hiring Our Heroes, and a lot of the other folks in the space that do this work. However, we'll prescribe that medication from their shelves if it makes sense for that client once we do a deep dive. So think of BufferSprings as a doctor's office for hiring veterans. Even though you came to us because your back hurts, we're going to do a full chart and understand that your legs are messed up, you can't see straight, you need glasses and all this stuff. Then we make the recommendations on the whole person concept rather than trying to solve one problem that may not even be the problem. And we do the same thing with vets and then match those two things up. So we get to know our clients, we get to know the vets, and then we're matching people up. The other analogy that I'll give you is like as like a dating service, like where some of the other transactional approaches, maybe like Tinder hookups real quick. You hook up at a job fair, you talk, and then you're off to the races. Like we're trying to make no shit marriages between smart companies and smart veterans that grow, that veteran continues to excel in a great environment, in a great workplace, and that company is getting a great dynamite employee who happens to be military experienced in the process. So that's really our approach to it and why we're different. And retention is our foremost focus. It's not putting an ass in a seat. It's keeping
Right.
that ass there and making sure that ass is happy and growing within that company.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love your rants about the veteran nonprofit industrial complex that is out there, man, because it absolutely drives me nuts sometimes. As you know, you're going through, and I mean, I remember like when I first started looking at all this stuff, and it's overwhelming the volume of stuff that's out there. And it's like, how do I really match up? Like, what makes this one really different from that one? And how do I know about this one? And oh, my buddy told me about this guy down here who does this, but he works with them. It's just all over the place, and
Yeah.
it's just it drives me nuts sometimes. Of just everyone wants to help veterans, and I'm using like big air quotes for everyone listening right now.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, help is important, but help is great. I appreciate help. I'm glad that our generation, we're not Vietnam veterans who got spit on when we came back home or something like that. Like I'm glad people want to help, but sometimes everyone wants to buy you a beer, but like no one wants to like you pick up the check at the end of the day or kind of thing. It's just there's a lot of goodwill that can only go so far. It drives me nuts.
Right. And that's one of the first things I say to companies. Like charity is a beautiful thing. Patriotism's awesome, but there's shitty reasons to hire veterans. There needs to be a business case. You
Yeah.
need to understand who's going to match your company. You can't just hire people or take people off a street corner because it's the nice thing to do. It's recipe for failure for that individual as well as that organization,
Yeah.
everybody
Both
around that
parties lose
individual.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not sustainable. It's not effective. It's lip service. It's flag waving. It's bullshit. And everybody sees through it now.
Yeah. 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 And it also, what I also see the other kind of problem with the like the nonprofit space in particular is that, okay, so I was at this networking event a couple months ago, and I saw one of these nonprofits. They were talking to a group of people in uniform, so I'm assuming they're probably getting out in the next couple of months. And they said to them, this woman was talking to him and was like, never hire someone to put together your resume. Okay. Now, I think generally speaking, there's definitely like hacks you can do it to be able to get it cheaper, or getting free is a good start if you've never put together a resume or something. But more my critique on it was like the mentality of when you're in the military, so many things are free to you. Okay. You want to get your taxes done. You need marriage counseling, financial counseling, whatever. It's all free. I'm here to tell you that like there are lots of people in the civilian world who are paying their way to do that bigger, faster, stronger because they can get better results out of paying for certain services. All right. Resume being one of them. All right. I've seen some resumes from some of these organizations, and I would tell you that a lot of them are hot garbage.
Oh
They're
yeah,
not well
it's a
written.
template.
They're not
It's a
put together
template.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And like I had someone reach out to me who said, you know, I sent in a resume to one of these big nonprofits, and I knew that it had errors in it, and they came back to me and said, like, oh yeah, looks good, man. So my point there is not, I'm not encouraging anyone to like go out and pay for a resume coach. My point is that if you are completely reliant on, you know, free to solve your problems during the transition, then sometimes the value you're going to get is equivalent to what you paid, which is nothing.
Yeah. And I mean, it's the results in anything else, especially if you're getting like a career coach or something. Like I can go to Planet Fitness and have their free trainer or whatever, but I'm not going to get the results that I'm going to get of having an actual
Right.
like bodybuilder training me to get, getting in that kind of shape. So that it really depends on who you have in your corner of doing that. And the results vary. The other thing I see with nonprofits, and I appreciate nonprofits so much and everything that they do in the space, but here's the issue is that nonprofits generate donation dollars and their, revenue streams, so to speak, out of getting people to throw money at the problem. So they go out there and they play a violin of how sad veterans are. That we're all PTSD ridden, fucked up, and all this stuff out there when we never acted like victims or anything when we were serving, but we get painted or have somebody else tell us this narrative that we're supposed to be wounded animals somehow. And that's how they generate donation dollars, and corporate America sees it. But the two narratives that are floating around out there, the hero narrative and then the complete polar opposite of victim, the majority of us just function in between. We served, we
Yeah.
did something, we moved on, and we still have a lot of gas left in the tank and want to do other things in our professional career. But that doesn't generate donation dollars, and that doesn't bring the spotlight that a hero would on there. But the funny part is like the people who identify as victims when they get out, we knew they were going to be identifying as victims anyway. They were the people that bitched and everything else, and they were bottom 10% shitbirds or whatever. And then the actual heroes are the guys who would never call themselves a hero out there.
Right.
So nobody actually fits into that mold. And even if they did, they don't call themselves that.
I think that's a great distinction. The hero, the hero labeling is so problematic in so many ways. Like one, first of all, you can get called a hero and you can be thinking to yourself, like, man, like I didn't really do anything
Right.
heroic. You know, I didn't pull someone out of a burning Humvee or jump into a grenade or something. And like, guess what? That's totally fine. You didn't have to do any of that stuff to have, have a good honorable service. Okay. So one, like you're kind of dealing with that. Like, I feel like I'm a little bit like, imposter syndrome going on. People call me a hero. I feel like I did anything heroic.
Yeah.
And the other end, the like other side of that too is, maybe you did some stuff that you're still a little like morally conflicted over. Okay. There
Yeah.
was the shot you took that still troubles you at night or something, or the call you made that still keeps you up, or the artillery you called in, whatever it is, that can still haunt people too. And then when someone's calling you a hero, you're thinking, oh, man, like I did this thing that I'm still a little unsure about. And now you're just going to be reticent to like want to talk about that with anyone. And you may have had every reason, every moral, tactical justification in the world to make whatever call you did, but you can feel that guilt and not want to go forward because you're worried about disappointing people who've labeled you a hero. It's something that pisses me off and I don't like it.
Yeah, I agree. And I've seen that narrative where people buy into it, it backfires. Because I've
Yeah.
done literally hundreds of veteran career fairs and put them on, orchestrated them and everything else. And I talked to as many people, companies and vets at those as possible. But I've seen vets just get that hero narrative and they just walk up to a company and they're like, what do you got for me? I'm here for my hero job. And it's like,
Yeah.
here, have some swag, take a pen and a stress ball and get the fuck away from my table. Like, it's like,
Yeah.
there's no place for that person there. Or even the victim thing where veterans start to second guess themselves and they're like, well, I'm broken or I'm somehow, or even when you're applying to jobs and that question comes up, are you a military veteran? And then usually the next question is, do you have a disability rating? And a lot of us have disability ratings from the VA and separation just because that's part of the system. But like you start to second guess, like, oh my God, is somebody going to see this on the other end and they don't want to help the troops or hug us or whatever else? Like, you don't
Right.
know who's on the receiving end of that, whether they think you're a hero or a victim, but whichever one that you believe, neither are true, but in your head they are true, and that's dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, Rob, we could sit here and just go off all day about this. I love it, man. Um, well, we're winding down to the last few minutes, and I want to be respectful of your time. So, in a minute, I'm going to pass it back over to you. Just provide any, last thoughts, words of wisdom, everything, if you will, and then give you a last chance to talk about Buffer Springs and how people can engage with you. Before I do, though, so question I always ask my guests: thinking back to your time in the Marine Corps, what was the best and or worst chow hall you ever ate at?
The best chow hall that I ever ate at was and I was only stationed at Lejeune, and then Iraq was, we were advanced party, so we were eating in tents and stuff like that. So
Right.
both were on Camp Lejeune. So our chow hall in French Creek, where I was at, they condemned the barracks and everything else where I actually lived, like shortly after I left there. But that chow hall was probably the worst chow hall. And then on Camp Lejeune, they had the Naval Hospital Chow Hall. So rather than eating gruel in our Marine Chow Hall, we take the 10-minute drive to the other side of base, and they had shrimp and lobster. There were like admirals dining in there. They had candles on the table and shit. I'm like, what is this? This is crazy. So I would say the Naval Hospital there was the better one. And I'm sure there's way better chow halls and everything else, but that was just my experience there. Both within pretty much a couple blocks from each other, the worst and the best. You can probably throw a rock between the two.
Oh, so actually, I think definitely my worst and at least top three, top two for sure. I kid you not. Like we're like 400 meters away from each other. I mean, like you could like see them from each other. Like that's how
Yeah.
close they were. And I mean, the worst one was awful. I mean, they had like, it was a prison release program. So like they would like bring guys from like the local prison to serve the food and everything. It was just, I'm not going to get in the graphic details, but there was not a meal that went in that came out the right way. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, so anyway, we quickly found the other one, which was infinitely better. Well,
Yeah.
cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
all right, man. Well, I super appreciate your time coming on. Lots of good stuff in here for everyone. So just want to pass it back over to you for any last thoughts that you want to give out to the crowd.
If you are an organization and you are committed to changing and creating a military effective program, not a veteran friendly program or a flag waving program, but you are serious about investing and bringing veterans in because you know what they bring to the table, we would love to chat with you. We do intake calls, get to know more about your organization. We'll be the first to tell you whether you're a fit for us and what we do and the work that we put on or not. I've turned away more business than I've taken on. When I first started BufferSprings back in January and I was writing down our core values, the first thing that I put on there from my experience is we don't do things with or for shitty people. Not saying that there's a lot of shitty people and whatnot out there, but that's just a core value here. So if we don't resonate or we don't understand, like we can't work with everybody, we can't solve everybody's problems on there. So is that like the end of the
No, sorry.
end of the podcast, right?
No,
Is that
no,
is that the,
sorry,
is that
man.
the hook to get me the fuck out of here?
No, I live maybe like 100 meters from some train tracks, and it just
Okay,
came
man.
through
Yeah,
right during like the
I
crest of
love it.
your wave right there.
I love it. So,
Okay,
so, so like
it
if you're interested in investing in a program, like we'd love to chat with you. As you can tell, like I'm very no bullshit in the approach here, but we build great programs. I've been doing this for 22 years now. I've seen and heard pretty much everything out there, so we can help you structure a great program for veterans specifically. And I see all these movements from underrepresented groups standing up, speaking with a collective unified voice and everything else. And to be honest, I'm kind of jealous of us as veterans for not jumping onto this. But as vets, we make up less than 5% of the population, yet we have no unified voice. We're letting other people tell the world that we're victims and we're heroes and all the other bullshit that's out there. Highly recommend any vet that wants to connect with me ever on LinkedIn, chat, coffee session, whatever. My porch light is always on to anybody who served in the military as well as military spouses. But would love to get more on a note where we can all speak collectively, collaborate, and work together, competitors and other counterparts in the industry, really empowering and lifting our military connected community up and creating a voice for ourselves and not letting veterans of yesteryear or the DOD or whoever else dictate or speak from our voice. That we need to come together and do this. So my porch light's always on for anybody who's listening to this.
love that message. And for those of you listening, so I know a good portion of the crowd maybe is still on active duty, and you're not necessarily in an organization yet, but I also know a large portion of the crowd has exited and like you're working somewhere. Okay, and so if anything about the organization you're working for you think could be improved, with how they're recruiting, retaining veterans, I strongly encourage you to like, hey, go to your boss, go to like, the veterans group, go to the HR manager, whoever, and say, hey, I know this guy, Rob, he runs this company called BufferSprings. And I think it'd be worth at least a call to talk to them to understand how they might help, help us recruit and retain veterans more efficiently to like, for really to improve the entire company for us. Okay. So absolutely encourage you all to think about that. If you're currently working in a company and you think there's some space for this there. All right. Everyone, appreciate you tuning in. Always appreciate y'all listening. My last ask of the crowd is that if you got some time, absolutely please go and leave me a review. So Spotify, I'll fully admit, does not have the best way to leave a review. I think you can only leave a star. If you go on Apple iTunes, you can leave a review there. So greatly appreciate those comments. And if you do, shoot me a message over social media or something. I always like to talk to people who are willing to do that for me. So thank you all for tuning in. I'll see you all next week. Take care.